Let's talk about Drake for a minute. I mean, a lot of people talk about him already, right? Sure. And I don't want to make this a video all about, what happened last summer, but I think it's a necessary context for what I'm about to go into here as an introduction to these concepts. Now, in the summer of 2024, Drake, multimedia superstar, Canadian television child actor, and also rapper, I guess, he got into a little bit of a scuffle with a man known as Kendrick Lamar Duckworth. Now, Kendrick Lamar is widely known as one of the most critically acclaimed rappers to ever do it. And Drake is not known as that. In fact, he's had probably one of the worst 10-year streaks in terms of the big three of rap, being J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, and Drake. Especially with his more recent albums, which have been pretty much universally panned from critics. He's never stopped selling records, but he's not exactly been tip-top form, And during his feud of last year, which produced a few tracks that I very much enjoy, he had a diss track called Tailor Made Freestyle, the second diss track he made specifically aimed towards Kendrick. And in this track, he did something that you probably shouldn't do if you're the biggest artist on earth. And that is, he used artificial intelligence, he used AI, in order to imitate the voices of legendary older generation rappers. Not a good look. In specific, he used artificial intelligence to mimic the voice of a man named Snoop Dogg, a legendary Californian rapper known to be very good friends with Kendrick Lamar, who he was fighting at the time with words, not with fists. But even more importantly, he probably made the worst decision of his life by choosing to use the voice of a man known as Tupac Shakur. Now, Tupac, as he was known while he was still alive and a rapper, is beloved pretty much universally for being one of the greatest hip-hop artists to ever live. That's how he's remembered anyways, but it's really difficult to say and understand the full impact of this decision that Drake made, because what came after that was thoughts from myself. I mean, I know that doesn't count for much, but I had thoughts about this. The implications that this could have on the music industry, because Drake, being one of the biggest artists on earth, now had given a pretty much a green light towards other artists to be using artificial intelligence in their music. And lo and behold, that happened. Not in the same way, but definitely in a way that is not very healthy for the industry and for the art of music itself. And the fact that Drake never actually experienced consequences for this is kind of odd to me. Of course, the Tupac estate threatened to take the music video down, but Drake took it down by himself, so he didn't actually face anything from this. It was never meant to be a commercial song in the first place, but this move kind of paints a few things in an odd light now that we're looking back on it, right? And there are dozens of problems with the song itself, and certain parts of it seem to have foreshadowed the fact that Drake filed a lawsuit against his own record label. But the AI usage, of course, and this is the entire point of this introduction section. You saw the name of this video and you clicked on it, so obviously you're gonna expect me to talk about this. So it's one thing to use artificial intelligence to help you make your music, fill in gaps in your music because you're lazy, and we'll talk about that in a minute with an example from another hip-hop veteran. And it's a whole other thing completely, though, to be using the tools that you have at your disposal to imitate artists who have passed away or artists who are still alive and didn't give you their consent, right? Because compensation of artists is a very important thing. The disrespect of a dead person that Drake did in this situation is kind of deplorable, wouldn't you say? And that brings up the question, is it moral, is it ethical, and is it good to be using artificial intelligence in music? Now, ultimately, you might be saying, oh, it's harmless, right? How much is the use of Tupac's voice even going to affect how music is made and the intricacies of it and the integrity of it, you know? But there's a broader problem. When artificial intelligence is used to mimic other people's works, it brings up the serious question of rightful compensation of artists for the work that they have done, and how much money they should be getting paid for it, you know? There's only so much that the American legal system, and the American legal system specifically, and I know a lot of other countries have a problem like this, but I'm talking in context of America specifically right now. There's only so much that the legal system can, and more importantly, will do to protect artists from a world where, as more and more artificial intelligence is being trained and actually even specifically being made for the sole purpose of replicating art forms that have been built on the backs of other people's hard work, it's important to bring understanding and to stop supporting artists who do actually use artificial intelligence and train it on other people's works and blatantly steal things from them. So in this video, we're going to talk about a few things. Let's talk about samples in music, especially artificial intelligence and the use of samples using artificial intelligence. We're going to be talking about Kanye West and his recent string of albums, and we're going to be talking about a very recent thing with Timbaland and Suno AI. Kanye has always been at the forefront of sonic innovation. He changed the sound of hip-hop, his genre, so many times over, with every single album he dropped after Late Registration, his second studio album. He pretty much entirely changed how every single rapper within the rap industry was making music. I mean, with his first and second albums, The College Dropout and Late Registration, he pioneered the use of chipmunk soul, which is essentially a musical style where you chop up bits of old soul songs and then you rap over them. A very specific old Kanye style that people seem to reference nowadays. And then came 808s and Heartbreak, which pretty much innovated the usage of the synth lines and the 808s within rap music through his very melodic, very low-key heartbreak tracks, and then Yeezus with his experimental, really grungy sound, and then Donda and Jesus is King with its very gospel-like sound. So it's no surprise that he's also played with AI, right? In early 2024, AI-generated Kanye songs began flooding platforms like TikTok and YouTube, and a lot of them were pretty much indistinguishable from the real thing. And though Kanye himself, he never really released them, fans, coders, clout chasers used his voice model to create everything from gospel tracks to diss records towards people like J. Cole and Drake and Kendrick Lamar even, due to past slights against Kanye West. And it's really interesting because that happened, and then he released an album known as Vultures 2. Vultures 2 is pretty much his worst, and I mean worst, album he's ever made. It has been received critically with no applause. Actually, it's been more like a lot of boos. And the interesting thing about there actually being AI Kanye tracks from earlier in the year in which he dropped Vultures 2 is that the entire album the entire album has pretty much about 20% of the tracks on the entire album actually have Kanye West's real voice on there. It's ridiculous, I know. But think about that for a second. 20% of the album, 20% of the songs on the album have Kanye's real voice on them. So what's the voice that we keep hearing throughout the album that's very clearly not Kanye? It's an artificial intelligence version of Kanye. Now, this brings up a few questions. First of all, how could you release an album that's not even finished, that has reference vocals, as he puts it, of your songs that you released in an official album release through an official music record label? How could you do that to your fans by releasing a half-finished project with very, very minimal vocals from you, the real you, because you're too hooked up on nitrous and too drugged up and too lazy even to actually finish the work that you decided to make? And this example seems to have spurred on a new kind of wave of artificial intelligence, especially using Kanye's voice within the general music landscape, which is not a good sign. The fact that an innovator, a genius of music even, in the past 20 years, somebody who's been on such a hot streak, who only recently lost their iconic status due to controversial statements made and them clearly losing their minds. The fact that Kanye West himself is seeming to endorse these applications that can mimic other people's voices is a concerning thing, especially because he's someone who's always advocated for freedom within the music industry and the freedom to be able to do what you want with your own creative image. And he's free to do what he wants with his voice. Of course he is. It's his voice. He owns the rights to his own voice. But I can't help but wonder, is this another example of Kanye's innovation? Or is it just the end of a true artistic identity, the end of artists being able to use their own voices and make songs that are unique and interesting and actually have value, instead of some person on the internet ripping their style off and using their own voice to get money and views and clicks on YouTube or TikTok or whatever site they're using? I don't know. I apologize for talking about hip-hop so much and rap. That's just that's my area of expertise. I listen to so much hip-hop every day. I've listened to over 350 hip-hop records. And by records, I mean albums, full-length albums, since the start of summer last year. And something I've gone into is the idea of the ghostwriter. Now, in hip-hop, ghostwriters are extremely controversial. Credibility, voice, authenticity, authorship is something that is so important within rap. At least it used to be, I guess. But at least when someone ghostwrites, there's human consent involved. An interesting thing that I think about when I look at how Drake used Snoop Dogg and Tupac's voice on Tailor-Made Freestyle is, in 2023, there was an AI track of Drake himself and The Weeknd called Heart on My Sleeve. And it was so nearly indistinguishable from the real Drake and the real Weeknd that people thought it was an actual unreleased song. And Drake took it down. At least his parent company did, for violating the use of his voice and his image. And that really makes me wonder, why did he decide, if he has experience with how artificial intelligence can take the influence and the voice and the consent of the person being mimicked away from them, why did he decide to use Tupac and Snoop Dogg's voice? I think it's interesting because Drake used ghostwriters. It's a very known industry secret. It's an industry secret that was exposed by a rapper by the name of Meek Mill back in 2016. Though it never really gained traction, and it kind of led to the downfall of that credibility matters era of hip hop. But like I said, with ghostwriters, at least there's consent, you know? And artificial intelligence changes that. You don't need to be a songwriter anymore, you know? You don't need to be an artist. You don't need to make albums with overreaching sounds and soundscapes and like ideas and through lines. You just need access to the internet and one of the many platforms that you can use in order to create a song that has been trained off of music that other people have put years and decades worth of effort and time into. Their life, the artists' lives, every artist that has ever touched like artificial intelligence, every artist whose work has been used to train something that allows just people to take their voices and ideas and concepts and faces and names and use them in whatever they want. As it becomes training data. Their cadence, your toy, you know? And let's think about that for a second. Anyone now can make a Kendrick song. Anyone can make an Adele song. Anyone can resurrect a dead artist and then make them say things they never would have said, politically or personally or creatively. Artificial intelligence has resurrected more than just Tupac. There have been tracks online that have been imitating every single dead rapper, every single great dead rapper, whether it be from the likes of the 90s legends like Biggie or Nate Dogg, or even going into the modern era after Juice WRLD died, after XXXTentacion died, after Mac Miller died. There are songs just taking all of these AI versions of these artists and creating them into weird amalgamations and saying things that they probably never would have said in real life. I saw a artificial intelligence cover of Juice WRLD, who was pretty openly not a conservative man. Like he was not conservative politically. He was good friends with Eminem for sakes. Like, he was not a conservative person, and I saw a Juice WRLD track when I was researching for this video that was pretty much just Trumpy propaganda released in 2024 during the election cycle. And it creates like a really weird illusion, you know? Like, that all of these dead artists are still creating music and evolving, and when in reality it's literally just fan fiction. And it's not just, you know, it's not just artificial intelligence cloning human voices. It's affecting producers too, because it's even easier to make a type beat, a producer, like a beat in the form of a producer through artificial intelligence than it is to make an entire song, because you train these learning machines off of music and musical stylings of a specific producer, and then you're able to completely reinvent a beat that artist never would have made, that producer hasn't made, and you're able to give them the illusion that this artist who was creating and evolving and still working on things and trying to expand their style is still making the same kinds of tracks that they were 20 years ago. Like, it's ridiculous. It's creating it's creating an entire economy in a sense. There's a application called Boomy that lets users generate songs with like a few prompts and pushes them directly onto Spotify and Apple Music, I'm pretty sure. And as of 2024, over 15 million songs. 15 million have been created using Boomy. And I've heard some of these and they sound real. Spotify even removed thousands of Boomy tracks in 2023 over streaming manipulation concerns. And other applications like Iva, Soundful, Amper, platforms used by indie creators and commercial producers alike to make royalty-free background music, is pretty much putting human composers out of work for things like ads and YouTube videos and low-budget films. It's not just a rap problem, it's a music industry problem, it's a culture problem. It's a problem for the whole of humanity, I think, because I've been talking specifically about music, but music isn't the only place where we see things like this. Artistry is something that's so important to me. I write. I would like to make music eventually, but I'm no good at rapping. I'm no good at singing. So I do things like this, and I write a lot. I mean, I've written 8 short films in the past week, and I think about this and I wonder, is art actually art if there's not a human behind it? Like, you can make something sound as audibly pleasing as you want. You can make something look as visually pleasing as you want through artificial intelligence, and you can capture a feeling, a sound, a trend, if you so want to, with artificial intelligence. It puts art in the hands of the regular everyman. But is that a good thing? I'm not saying art should be classist. I'm not saying that art should be like this thing that is squared away from the normal person and only given to people who have the purest of artistic integrity, you know? But I'm just saying, like, shouldn't art be reserved at least for the people who have actual ideas and effort and work? You know, what happens to the music industry? What happens when the next generation of musicians and artists, when their idols are infinitely replaceable, you know? What happens when music that represents struggle and identity and pain and power struggle and imbalance within a political context and all these cool things are reduced to a few words on a prompt? I don't know. I can't give you an answer to that because I don't know. Artificial intelligence isn't evil. It's a tool, it's an instrument, and it does what the person using it wants it to do. And like a lot of tools, like a lot of instruments, well, not instruments, but, you know, things used to complete certain tasks, like a lot of these things, the people using it don't seem to care or understand the fact that it puts people out of money, it puts people out of jobs, it takes genuine effort away from the people who have been putting the effort in, and it makes everything so saturated that real good artistry is no longer appreciated. I think we should just be a little bit more careful with artificial intelligence, you know? Thank you for watching, and I bid you farewell.